My son promised to take care of my wife, who had Parkinson's disease while I was undergoing surgery. I woke up in the recovery room and saw 20 missed calls from my neighbor. Your wife is sitting outside on the porch. Your son left 3 hours ago. I called my son, and he simply said, "My mother-in-law needs me more." That night I was discharged from the hospital and went home. What I did next was something he would regret forever. Welcome back to Dad's Revenge Stories. I'm so grateful you're spending your time here with us today. Drop a comment below letting me know which city or country you're watching from. Note, this story features dramatic and educational elements. Any resemblance to names or places is coincidental, but the message within remains deeply valuable. The first thing I felt when I opened my eyes was the cold. Not the cold of the recovery room, though the air conditioning was running hard enough that I could hear it humming somewhere above my head. It was a different kind of cold. The kind that settles into your chest when something is wrong and your body knows it before your mind catches up. The ceiling tiles were white and perfectly square. Fluorescent light pressed down on me from every direction. I tried to move my right hand and felt the IV line tug against the back of my wrist. The surgery was over. That much I understood. The clock on the wall across from my bed read 1:47 in the afternoon. I had gone in at 9:30 that morning. My name is Walter Hale. I am 68 years old. I spent 40 years working as a civil engineer for the city of Columbus, Ohio. And I built a life the only way I knew how, slowly, carefully, one solid thing at a time. A house on Claremont Drive with a wraparound porch. A marriage that lasted longer than most people's careers. A son I was prouder of than I ever knew how to say out loud. That morning before they wheeled me into the operating room, I had one concern. It was not the surgery itself. Laparoscopic gallbladder removal is routine enough that Dr. Patricia Owens had described it to me the same way a mechanic describes an oil change. Something that needed doing, not something to lose sleep over. My concern was the woman I had left at home, my wife Margaret Hale. Everyone who loved her called her Peggy. Peggy was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 3 years ago in the fall of 2021. Stage 2 by last spring. Her left hand trembled almost constantly now, and her right hand was not far behind. She moved through the house by touching the walls, by gripping door frames, by memorizing the distance between the kitchen counter and the table so she would not have to look down and lose her balance. She had not complained once, not in 3 years. That was the kind of woman she was. Leaving her alone for even a few hours was not something I took lightly. But my husband had been deployed. No, that was not my story. My story was simpler and more painful than that. I had called our son. Derek was 38 years old and lived 20 minutes away in Gahanna. He had come to the hospital that morning and stood beside my bed while the nurses prepared the preoperative IV. He had gripped my hand. His grip was firm the way it used to be when he was a teenager, and wanted me to know he was serious, and he had looked me straight in the eye. "Dad, don't worry about Mom," he said. "I've got her. Just focus on getting through this." I had believed him. God help me, I had believed every word. I thought about Peggy as they rolled me down the hallway toward the operating theater. I thought about the way she had looked that morning, sitting on the edge of our bed in her blue wool sweater, both hands pressed flat against the mattress to steady herself while I tied my shoes. She had watched me with those steady brown eyes of hers and said to "Come home safe, Walter." Just those 3 words. She never wasted language on things she did not mean. I thought about our daughter-in-law Amber's silver car pulling into the driveway to pick up Derek after I left. I thought about our niece Donna, Derek's younger sister, who lived in Westerville and called every Sunday to ask how Peggy was doing. I had almost called Donna instead. Something in the back of my mind had tugged at me to call her. I had not listened to it. The anesthesia took me under between one thought and the next. When I surfaced, it was 1:47, and my phone was on the bedside table and the screen was lit up like a warning sign. I reached for it with my left hand because the IV was in my right. My fingers were still clumsy from the medication, and I nearly knocked the phone to the floor before I caught it. I turned it face up. 20 missed calls. Every single one was from Frank Calloway. Frank was 71 years old and had lived next door to us on Claremont Drive for 19 years. He was the kind of neighbor who returned your garbage cans to the side of the house after collection day and left zucchini from his garden on your porch in the summer without knocking. He was not a man who called once, let alone 20 times. My heart knocked hard against the inside of my chest. I pressed the callback button before I had fully processed what I was doing. It rang once. Frank picked up on the first ring. "Walter." His voice came through the phone, rough and unsteady, like a man who had been pacing for hours and had run out of ways to calm himself down. "Walter, thank God you picked up." "Frank." My voice came out lower than I intended, scraped thin by the intubation tube they had used during surgery. "Frank, what's happening?" He exhaled a long, shaking breath that told me he had been holding it for a very long time. "Walter, I need you to stay calm. Ruth has Peggy. She's inside our house right now. She's warm. She's got tea. I need you to know that first before I say anything else." The monitor beside my bed registered something. A nurse appeared in the doorway, glanced at the screen, and took a step toward me. I held up one finger to stop her. She hesitated, then stayed where she was. "Tell me everything," I said. Frank's voice dropped the way a man's voice drops when he is about to say something he wishes he did not have to say. "Ruth went out to water her roses around 12:30. She heard something. A scraping sound," she said, "coming from your side of the fence." He paused. "Walter." Peggy was on the porch. She was trying to get to the front door, but was having trouble standing steady. Ruth found her before anything worse happened, and she was shaken but okay. I pressed my back teeth together until my jaw ached. Ruth brought her straight inside. Frank continued his words, coming faster now like he needed to get through them. "Made her sit down, got her slippers on her feet, put the kettle on. Peggy didn't want to make a fuss. You know how she is. She kept saying she was fine, kept saying not to worry you." His voice cracked on the last word. "Walter Derrick left before 10 o'clock. Ruth saw his car pull out. I didn't think anything. At first, I figured maybe he had to run a quick errand. But when Ruth found Peggy, I checked my watch and it was going on 1 in the afternoon. That's over 3 hours she was alone." "Almost 2 hours?" I repeated. The words felt strange in my mouth. Hollow. "I tried calling you the minute Ruth got Peggy settled," Frank said. "I know you were in surgery. I knew you couldn't pick up. But I didn't know what else to do, Walter. I didn't feel right not trying." "You did the right thing," I said. "Frank, you did exactly the right thing." I thought about calling 911, he said quickly. "I want you to know that." But Peggy was alert. She knew where she was. She wasn't in any pain beyond the scrape. "Ruth is a retired ER nurse," she checked her over. "We made a judgment call. If anything had seemed serious, I would have called without thinking twice. I know you would have." I meant it completely. Ruth Calloway had spent 22 years in the emergency room at Ohio Health Riverside before she retired. If she said Peggy was stable, Peggy was stable. "Can I talk to her?" A rustling sound on the line. Then Peggy's voice, thin and careful the way it got when she was trying to sound steadier than she felt. "Walter, how did the surgery go?" Something climbed up the back of my throat. I forced it back down. It went fine, sweetheart. Dr. Owens says everything looks good. I kept my voice even. How are you feeling? I'm fine, she said immediately. Ruth made chamomile tea. I'm perfectly fine, Walter. Don't cut your recovery short on my account. Peggy. I said her name quietly. Did you fall? A pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. In 40 years of marriage, I had learned that Peggy's pauses meant more than most people's sentences. I stumbled a little on the steps, she said finally. It was nothing. Frank says you were outside for close to 2 hours. Another pause, shorter this time. I didn't want to be a bother to the neighbors. I closed my eyes. The fluorescent light pressed red through my eyelids. My wife had been sitting alone on our porch steps in the September air, unable to get her footing, unwilling to call for help, because she did not want to inconvenience anyone, and our son had been gone for 2 hours. Can I ask you something? I said. Your phone, Peggy. Why didn't you call me? Her answer came slowly. My hands were shaking worse than usual this morning. I couldn't get the screen to register my fingerprint, and I couldn't hold the phone steady enough to type the passcode. A beat. I tried 3 times, Walter. I'm sorry. Don't you apologize to me. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. I softened it. Don't you ever apologize for that. None of this is your fault, I heard her breathe. Where is Derek? She asked. Is he still at the hospital with you? I looked at the ceiling, at the perfectly square white tiles, at the fluorescent light that made everything look clinical and certain and manageable when nothing was any of those things. I'm going to find out, I said. You stay with Ruth. I'll be there soon. I said goodbye and handed the phone back, then immediately pulled it toward me again and scrolled to Derek's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. Through the window of the recovery room, I could see a slice of gray September sky above the hospital parking structure. Somewhere under that same sky, my son had driven away from our house before 11 o'clock and had not come back. I pressed call. It rang 3 times before he picked up. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Dad. Derek's voice was loose and easy, the voice of a man who had spent the last several hours doing exactly what he wanted to do. Hey, how did the surgery go? Are you feeling okay? For a moment, I could not speak. Not because I had nothing to say, because I had too much, and 40 years of being a measured man had trained me to slow down before I opened my mouth when it mattered most. I breathed in through my nose. The recovery room smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. Where are you right now, Derek? I asked. A half-second pause. I stepped out for a bit. Why, what's going on? I need you to tell me where you are. I'm in Bexley, he said, at a place Gloria wanted to check out. Dad, what's wrong? You're scaring me. Gloria Simmons was Amber's mother. She was 63 years old, lived alone in a 2-bedroom condo in Bexley, and as far as I had ever been able to determine, was in perfectly good health. She walked 3 miles every morning. She drove herself to her book club every other Thursday. She had told me at Christmas last year that her blood pressure was, and I am quoting directly, quote, better than her doctor's, end quote. Gloria Simmons did not need help getting through a Tuesday afternoon. Derek. I said, Frank Calloway just called me. He told me your mother was found on the front porch steps trying to get inside the house on her own. Ruth had to help her up. Your mother has a scrape on her knee from where she went down on the steps. She was outside alone for close to 2 hours. I kept my voice flat, steady, the way I used to speak on job sites when something had gone wrong, and I needed every man on the crew to stay focused. Your mother has Parkinson's disease. You knew that when you made me a promise this morning. The silence on his end lasted 4 full seconds. I counted them. Dad, I'm sorry. Okay, I am. But Gloria called me and she was really upset, and Amber asked me to go, and Mom seemed fine when I left. She was sitting on the couch. I turned the TV on for her. You turned the television on for her, I repeated. She had the remote. She could have called someone if she needed anything. She could not operate her phone, Derek. Her hands were shaking too badly to enter her passcode. She tried 3 times. My voice stayed level. I was gripping the bed rail with my free hand, and I could feel the cool metal bar biting into my palm, but my voice stayed level. She was on that porch for 2 hours because she could not call anyone, and you were the only person who was supposed to be there. I was gone for a little while, Dad. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Gloria needed someone to drive her to look at a few things, and it wasn't like I was going to be gone all day. What did Gloria need, Derek? I asked. What was so urgent that you left your mother alone? Another pause. Shorter this time, and something in the quality of it told me he was deciding how much to say. She wanted to look at some home decor stuff. There's a new place in Bexley she'd been wanting to check out. It wasn't Dad, it was a quick trip. I stared at the ceiling tiles. A home decor store. My wife had spent 2 hours unable to get inside her own house because our son had left to take his mother-in-law to a home decor store. Gloria needed me more right now, Dad. His voice took on a firmer edge, the edge of a man who has decided that the best defense is to sound reasonable. Mom was settled. She had the TV on. I didn't think she'd try to go anywhere. She didn't try to go anywhere, I said. She tried to get inside. There is a difference. Dad, I want you to go to Frank Calloway's house right now and pick up your mother and take her home. My voice had dropped to something very quiet. In my experience, quiet is more effective than loud. Loud tells people you have lost control. Quiet tells them you mean every word. I am going to be there as soon as I am able to leave this hospital. We are going to talk about this when I get home. Okay, Derek said. He sounded like a teenager who had been caught breaking curfew and was calculating how much trouble he was actually in. Okay, Dad, I'll go get her. Derek. I said his name before he could hang up. When you see your mother, you look her in the eye. You understand me? You look her in the eye. He said he would. He said he was sorry. He said it the way people say sorry when they mean that they are sorry they got caught, not sorry for what they did. I had been listening to human beings talk for 68 years, and I knew the difference between those 2 kinds of sorry, the way I knew the difference between load-bearing walls and partition walls. One of them holds the structure up. The other one is just there to fill the space. I ended the call and set the phone face down on the blanket covering my legs. My abdomen pulled and throbbed where the incisions were. 3 small cuts, Dr. Owens had told me. Laparoscopic means they go in through small openings rather than one large one, which means less recovery time, less scarring, less pain. I had not felt the pain much since I woke up. I felt it now. I pressed the call button for the nurse. When she came in, I told her I needed my discharge paperwork. She stared at me. Mr. Hale, you've been out of surgery for less than 30 minutes. I understand that, I said. Please get me Dr. Owens. Dr. Patricia Owens was not a woman who raised her voice. In the brief hours since she had taken me through my surgery, she had spoken at the same measured, unhurried pace, whether she was explaining post-operative care instructions or telling me that my gallbladder had been more inflamed than the imaging suggested. She was the kind of doctor who made you feel that whatever was happening was manageable, that she had seen worse and handled it, and that you were in capable hands. She looked at me now the way she might look at a structural crack in an otherwise sound building. Concerned, analytical, not panicked, but not dismissing it either. "Mr. Hale," she said, "you've been out of surgery for less than 40 minutes. Your body just went through a major procedure. I understand something has happened at home, but leaving before proper recovery could create serious health concerns." "I understand the risks," I said. "I want the AMA paperwork." She studied me for a moment. AMA means Against Medical Advice. It is a form that hospitals require patients to sign when they choose to leave before their medical team recommends discharge. Signing it means you acknowledge that you are leaving at your own risk, that the hospital is not responsible for whatever happens next. Dr. Owens knew I understood this. She had already figured out in the short time we had spent together that I was not a man who said things he did not mean. "Is there someone who can be with you?" she asked. "I'm going to my neighbor's house first," I said. "My wife is there." She held my gaze for another 3 seconds. Then she nodded once and went to get the paperwork. I signed my name on the release form with my left hand, because the IV had been in my right, and even after they removed the line, the inside of my wrist was sore. My signature looked unsteady on the page. I did not recognize it as mine. I folded my copy of the form and put it in the pocket of the clothes the nurse helped me change back into, and I called an Uber from the chair beside the bed while she went over the discharge instructions I had already decided I was going to follow as closely as my circumstances allowed. The car arrived in 6 minutes, a gray sedan. The driver did not try to make conversation, which I was grateful for. We pulled out of the hospital parking structure and into the gray September afternoon, and I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes and let the motion of the car carry me. I thought about the first apartment Peggy and I had shared on the east side of Columbus, 3 floors up, with a radiator that knocked all winter and a window in the kitchen that looked out over a parking lot. Peggy had hung curtains, yellow ones with small white flowers. She said if you were going to look at something every morning while you drank your coffee, it ought to be something that made you feel like the day was worth starting. I thought about the day she was diagnosed. October 14th, 2021. A Tuesday. We had driven together to the neurologist's office on Fifth Avenue, and the doctor, a careful, soft-spoken man named Dr. Ellison, had walked us through the imaging results and used the word Parkinson's twice, once when explaining what he was seeing and once when he told us what it would mean going forward. Peggy had asked 3 precise practical questions about medication management and physical therapy options. She had not cried until we got to the car. Neither had I. That evening I had called Derek to tell him. He had said, "Is it genetic, Dad?" And I had said I didn't know yet. And he had said, "Okay, let me know what you find out." And that had been the end of it. He had not asked how his mother was feeling. He had not asked if we needed anything. He had asked whether it might affect him personally, and when I could not immediately answer that question, he had moved on. I had told myself at the time that he was processing it, that people handle difficult news differently. I had given him the same benefit of the doubt I had been giving him for 38 years. I thought about Donna, his younger sister, who had called me the following Sunday. She had said, "Uncle Walter, I've been reading everything I can find about Parkinson's care. Can I come over Saturday and talk through some of it with you and Aunt Peggy?" She had brought a folder, printed articles highlighted in 3 different colors. She had sat at our kitchen table for 2 hours and asked Peggy questions about how she was sleeping, whether the tremor was worse in the morning or the evening, what she found most frustrating about the day-to-day of it. Peggy had cried a little at one point. Donna had simply reached across the table and put her hand over Peggy's shaking one and left it there. The Uber turned onto Claremont Drive. I opened my eyes. The houses on our street looked the way they always looked, in September lawns gone slightly dry at the edges. flower beds thinning out the particular quality of afternoon light that comes in autumn at a lower angle and makes everything look more permanent than it is. Frank and Ruth's house had yellow mums planted along the front walk. Their porch light was on even though it was not yet dark. I paid the driver and stepped out of the car. The incision sights pulled as I straightened up. 3 small points of pain arranged in a line across my lower right abdomen. I pressed my right hand flat against my side and walked up Frank and Ruth's front path toward the porch light. The door opened before I reached the steps. Frank stood in the doorway, his face carrying the particular expression of a man who has been waiting and worrying and is relieved and sorrowful in equal measure. Behind him, through the warm lit interior of the house, I could see the kitchen table. Peggy was sitting at it, both hands wrapped around a mug. Her blue wool sweater, the one she had been wearing when I left that morning, had a small grass stain on the left sleeve that had not been there before. She looked up and saw me. She looked up and saw me, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then Peggy set her mug down on the kitchen table with both trembling hands, carefully the way she did everything carefully now, and she said my name, just my name. Walter? The way she said it made something crack open in the middle of my chest. I crossed Frank and Ruth's kitchen in 4 steps and crouched down in front of her chair. My incision sights screamed at the movement. I did not care. I took her face in both hands and looked at her. Really looked the way you look at someone when you have spent the last 2 hours being afraid of what you might find. And what I found was my wife. Tired, shaken underneath the careful composure she was holding on to, but whole. "I'm here," I said. "I'm right here." Her hands came up and gripped my wrists. Her grip was weaker than it used to be, but it was there. "You shouldn't have left the hospital," she said. "Walter, you just had surgery this morning. I'm aware of that. You're going to hurt yourself." "Peggy." I kept my voice gentle. "Let me see your knee." She pressed her lips together the way she did when she was about to argue, and had already decided she was going to lose. She pushed the hem of her slacks up a few inches. Ruth had cleaned the scrape and covered it with a square of white gauze taped down neatly at the corners. The skin around the bandage was red and slightly swollen. "It's nothing," Peggy said. Ruth made a bigger fuss than it deserved. Ruth was standing at the kitchen counter, and I heard her exhale sharply through her nose at that. "It was bleeding when I found her," Ruth said to me directly, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent 22 years in an emergency room and was not going to pretend otherwise. "She went down on that knee hard. She's lucky she didn't hit her head on the railing." Peggy's jaw tightened. "I did not go down hard. I stumbled." "You were on the ground when I came around the fence," Ruth said. "Not unkindly. Just factually the way ER nurses state facts. You were trying to push yourself back up." I was still crouched in front of Peggy's chair. I watched her face when Ruth said that, watched the small, involuntary flicker of something that moved across her expression and was gone almost before it arrived. Embarrassment, maybe. Or something closer to grief. The grief of a woman who had spent her whole life being capable, being the one who handled things, being the person other people leaned on, and who was now having to accept being found on the ground by her neighbor. I put my hand over hers on the armrest. "Peggy, where was Derek when you went down?" Her eyes moved to the window above the kitchen sink. Outside, the light was going golden and thin, the way it does in Columbus. In September, everything taking on that particular amber quality that always made our street look like something from a painting. "He had to go," she said. "I know he had to go. I spoke to him." I kept my hand over hers. "I want to know what he said to you before he left." She was quiet for a moment. Frank had moved to stand in the doorway between the kitchen and the hall, and Ruth had stopped moving at the counter, and the only sound in the house was the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the block. "He said I should rest," Peggy said finally. "He said he would be back soon." "Did he say where he was going?" Her chin lifted slightly. "He said Amber needed him for something." "And you didn't ask what—" "Walter." Her voice dropped. Not sharp. Soft in the way that sometimes cuts deeper than sharp. "Don't make trouble for Derek. He made a mistake. He's still our son." I looked at my wife, at the white gauze bandage on her knee, at the grass stain on the left sleeve of her blue wool sweater that she had not noticed yet, or had noticed, and decided not to mention. At the way her hands would not stop their slow, constant trembling, no matter how tightly she pressed them together. She was protecting him. Even now, sitting in our neighbor's kitchen with a scraped knee and 2 hours of September air still in her bones, she was protecting him. "Okay," I said quietly. I helped Peggy to her feet, and Frank got her coat from the hook by the door, and Ruth pressed a small bag into my hands with extra gauze and antiseptic ointment and a printed sheet of wound care instructions that she had written out by hand in her clear, even handwriting. I thanked them both. The words felt inadequate. I meant them completely. The walk back to our house took longer than it should have. I kept my hand under Peggy's elbow the whole way, and she let me, which told me more about how tired she was than anything she had said. We went up our porch steps, the same steps she had been unable to manage alone, one at a time, slowly. I got her settled on the sofa with a blanket and a fresh cup of tea and the television on low. I told her I needed to check something on my phone and that I would be right back. She was already leaning against the cushions with her eyes half closed by the time I stepped into the hallway. I sat down at the desk in my office and opened the banking app on my phone. I pulled up the transaction history on the credit account, the main card, and the supplemental card I had added 2 years ago for Derek to use for household emergencies. The most recent transaction on Derek's supplemental card read, "Serenity Day Spa, $480, 11:47 a.m. I set the phone down on the desk. I picked it up again. I looked at the timestamp a second time to make sure I had read it correctly. 11:47 in the morning. I pulled up my call log and found Frank's first missed call. 12:41 p.m. Derek had used my credit card to pay for a spa visit for Gloria Simmons at 11:47 in the morning. Over an hour later, Frank Calloway had begun calling me because my wife was on the ground outside our house. I set the phone face down on the desk. I opened the top drawer, and I saw sitting right where I had left it 6 months ago a single folded piece of paper. I had put the paper in that drawer 6 months ago in April, after a family dinner at our house that had ended with Derek and me sitting at this same desk while Peggy and Amber watched television in the other room. It had been my idea. I am not too proud to admit that. After the third time in as many months that Derek had canceled plans to come help Peggy with her physical therapy exercises, always with a reason, always with an apology that sounded practiced, I had suggested that we write it down. Not as a legal document, nothing formal, just the two of us putting words on paper so that there would be no room for misunderstanding later. Derek had agreed without hesitation, which I had taken as a good sign. He had written it himself. I had not dictated it. He had picked up the pen and written in his own hand, in the unhurried, slightly left-leaning cursive he had learned in 3rd grade and never entirely outgrown, "I will never leave Mom alone without supervision." I understand that she requires consistent support and that this responsibility belongs to our family. I pressed his hand. He had signed it at the bottom. Derek Allen Hale. The date, April the 9th, 2024. I unfolded the paper now and smoothed it flat on the desk with my palm. The crease down the middle had softened from 6 months of sitting folded in the dark, but the words were still sharp and clear. I read the sentence twice. I read his signature once. Then my phone buzzed on the desk beside me. A text from Frank Calloway. No message. Just an image attachment. I opened it. It was a screenshot of an Instagram story. The account belonged to Derek. I recognized the profile photo in the upper left corner, the one Amber had taken of him at a Columbus Clippers game 2 summers ago, grinning with a foam finger raised. The story itself was a photo taken inside what appeared to be a coffee shop. A marble tabletop, a ceramic cup with a latte design pressed into the foam. One of Derek's hands, visible at the edge of the frame, relaxed the sleeve of his gray quarter zip pushed up to the elbow. The caption read, "Good vibes only." Below the photo in small gray text, the timestamp 12:23 p.m. I set the phone down. I picked it up again. I placed the phone on the desk directly beside the folded paper and looked at the two things together. At 11:47 in the morning, Derek had used my credit card to pay $480 at Serenity Day Spa for Gloria Simmons. At 12:23 in the afternoon, he had been sitting in a coffee shop photographing his latte. At 1:04 in the afternoon, Frank Calloway had begun calling me because my wife was on the ground outside our house. I thought about Peggy on the porch steps. The way she had looked when I crouched in front of her chair in Frank's kitchen. The careful composure, the white gauze bandage, the grass stain on her sleeve that she had not mentioned. The way she had said, "Don't make trouble for Derek," with that soft voice that cuts deeper than sharp ones. She had been sitting outside in September air for close to 2 hours, with hands too unsteady to unlock her own phone, and our son had been sending the universe good vibes from a coffee shop 12 minutes away. I stood up from the desk. The incision sites pulled as I rose. I walked down the hallway to the living room and stood in the doorway. Peggy was asleep on the sofa. The blanket had slipped down from her shoulders slightly, and her left hand rested on the cushion beside her, trembling with the slow, involuntary rhythm that never fully stopped even in sleep. The television was still on low, a cooking show. Someone was explaining how to properly fold butter into pastry dough. I walked over and pulled the blanket back up to her shoulders. I stood there for a moment and watched her breathe. Then I went back to my office. I sat down, picked up my phone, and called Frank. He answered on the second ring. "Walter, how is she?" "She's sleeping," I said. "Frank, where did you get that screenshot?" "Ruth saw it," he said. "She follows Derek on Instagram. Amber set it up for her last Christmas, showed her how to use the app." Ruth was sitting with Peggy this afternoon, and her phone buzzed with the notification that Derek had posted a story. She showed me. I took a screenshot before it could disappear. A pause. "Walter, I want you to know we debated whether to send it. We didn't want to cause more trouble. But Ruth said you deserved to know the full picture." She was right," I said. "Tell Ruth she was right." I thanked Frank and ended the call. I opened the desk drawer again and looked at what was inside it, the folded paper with Derek's signature, and beside it, a pen. I picked up the pen. I turned Derek's letter over to the blank side and wrote 4 words across the top: Thomas Breyer. Monday morning. Thomas Breyer had been my attorney for 11 years. He had drawn up our wills, handled the refinancing on the house, and told me 2 years ago in his careful, unhurried way that I ought to review who held what authority over our affairs. I had thanked him and changed the subject because I had not been ready to hear what he was actually telling me. I was ready now. I folded the paper again and put it back in the drawer. I closed the drawer. I looked at the framed photograph on the corner of my desk. Peggy and me on the wraparound porch of this house, taken the summer we moved in, before the diagnosis, before any of this. She was laughing at something just outside the frame. I could not remember now what it had been. My phone buzzed again. Another text. This one from Derek. Dad, I'm heading over to check on you and Mom. Be there in 20 minutes. I set the phone face down on the desk and did not move for a long moment. Outside the window, the September evening had gone fully dark. Somewhere down Claremont Drive, a dog was barking at something it could hear but could not see. I knew the feeling. 20 minutes turned into 40. I sat at my desk and did not move. I did not turn on the overhead light when the room went dark around me. I just sat in the glow of the desk lamp and looked at the two things in front of me, the folded paper with Derek's signature and my phone with his text still on the screen, and I let myself think about things I had been refusing to think about for a very long time. Peggy had been diagnosed in October of 2021. In the 3 years since that Tuesday's afternoon in Dr. Ellison's office on Fifth Avenue, I had driven her to 41 follow-up appointments at the neurology clinic at Ohio Health Riverside. I knew this because I kept a log, a small spiral notebook in the glove compartment of my car, where I wrote down the date, the name of the attending physician, the current medication dosages, and any changes to her treatment plan. 41 appointments over 3 years. I had not missed one. Derek had come to 0. I was not keeping score. That is not the kind of man I am, and it is not the kind of marriage Peggy and I had built. But I want to be precise about what I mean when I say Derek had never been involved in his mother's care, because I think there is a difference between a son who tries and falls short and a son who does not try at all. He had never asked me what medications Peggy was taking. He had never asked what the side effects were or whether she was sleeping well, or whether the tremor had gotten better or worse since her last dosage adjustment. He had never looked up Parkinson's disease on his own time and come to us with questions the way Donna had. He had never once offered to drive Peggy to an appointment so that I could have a morning off. What he had done in that same 3-year period was this. He had driven Gloria Simmons to her quarterly checkups at her internist's office in Bexley 4 times a year, every year, without being asked. He had installed grab bars in her bathroom after she mentioned once in passing at Thanksgiving that she sometimes felt unsteady getting out of the tub. He had called her every evening between 8 and 8:30, a habit so consistent that Amber had once mentioned it to Peggy with what I can only describe as pride. And 8 months ago, for Gloria's 63rd birthday, he had driven her to a showroom in Dublin and spent $3,500 on a massage chair because she had admired one in a catalog. $3,500. I had never once heard Derek ask his mother whether her back hurt. The birthday that came back to me most sharply was Peggy's 64th last March. We had planned a small dinner, just the 4 of us, Derek and Amber, Peggy and me, at a restaurant on High Street that Peggy had wanted to try for years. 7 o'clock reservation. Derek called at 9:54 in the evening, 3 hours after we had already eaten, and come home to say he was sorry he had missed it. He and Amber had been helping Gloria rearrange her living room furniture, and it had taken longer than expected. Peggy had said it was fine. She had been in her pajamas by then, sitting on the edge of the bed while I helped her with the buttons she could no longer manage easily. She had said it was fine in the same voice she used for everything she had decided not to be upset about, quiet, deliberate, slightly too even. I had believed her because I wanted to, because it was easier, because believing her meant I did not have to look at what was actually happening in front of me. I was looking at it now. The desk lamp cast a small yellow circle of light across the surface of the desk, and outside that circle the room was entirely dark, and I sat in that small circle of light and understood something I should have understood a long time ago. My son had 2 mothers in his life. One of them had raised him, fed him, sat up with him, through fevers and nightmares and the particular miseries of adolescence, and was now fighting a disease that stole her coordination, one tremor at a time. The other one had a perfectly good internist, a fully functional bathroom, and a massage chair that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. He had chosen every single time without apparent conflict or hesitation the one who needed him least. I heard the front door. Not a knock. A key in the deadbolt, the particular sound of someone who has had a key to your house long enough that they no longer think to knock first. The lock turned. The door swung open. I heard Derek's voice from the entryway, low and careful, the way you speak when you are trying to determine whether someone is asleep. "Dad, Mom." I heard Peggy stir on the sofa. Her voice came soft and blurred at the edges with sleep. "Derek." "Hey, Mom." His voice shifted into something warmer, gentler, the voice he used with her when other people were listening. "How are you feeling?" I came as soon as I could. I sat very still at my desk in the dark room and listened to my son tell my wife he had come as soon as he could. Then I stood up and I walked to the doorway of my office and I turned on the hall light. Derek was standing in the living room in his gray quarter zip, the same one from the Instagram photo, holding a paper bag from the Thai place on Morse Road that Peggy had always liked. He looked up when the light came on. His expression moved through several things in the space of a second: surprise, then calculation, then the careful arrangement of concern. "Dad," he said, "you look tired. How are you feeling?" I looked at the paper bag in his hand. I looked at his face. I looked at the gray quarter zip with its sleeve pushed up the same way it had been in the photograph taken at 12:23 this afternoon. "Come sit down, Derek," I said. "I want to show you something." Derek followed me down the hallway and into my office, still carrying the paper bag from the Thai place. He set it on the corner of the desk, without being asked, the way a man does when he wants to appear at home somewhere. He looked around the room at the desk lamp, casting its small yellow circle at the dark window, at the two items sitting in the center of the desk, and his eyes settled on the folded paper, without quite landing on it. "Sit down," I said. He sat in the chair across from the desk. The chair where Thomas Breyer had sat 2 years ago when he came to the house to update our wills. Derek leaned back slightly and crossed one ankle over his knee, a posture I recognized as his version of looking relaxed when he was not. I remained standing. "I want to ask you something before I show you what's on this desk," I said. "And I want you to think before you answer. Did you check on your mother before you left this morning?" Derek's jaw shifted. "Dad, I already explained." "I'm not asking for an explanation. I'm asking whether you checked on her, whether you looked at her and asked if she needed anything before you walked out the front door." A pause. "I told her to rest." "Did you ask her if she needed her 11 o'clock medication before you left?" His eyes moved to the desk. "I didn't think about that." "She takes 4 medications at 11 o'clock. Derek. Carbidopa levodopa for the tremor. A blood pressure tablet. A vitamin D supplement, because she doesn't absorb it well from food anymore. And a low-dose aspirin because her cardiologist added it 18 months ago." I kept my voice level. "I have been managing those 4 medications every single day for 3 years. In all that time, you have never once asked me what they were." Derek opened his mouth. I raised one hand, not aggressively, just firmly, and he closed it again. I picked up my phone and turned the screen toward him. The banking app was still open on the transaction history page. "This is the supplemental credit card I added to my account 2 years ago. I told you it was for household emergencies." I let him look at the screen for a moment. "Serenity Day Spa, $480. 11:47 in the morning. Derek's jaw tightened. The relaxed posture dissolved. His ankle came down from his knee and both feet went flat on the floor. Dad, Gloria had a gift card that expired and she needed... It was charged to my card, Derek. Whatever arrangement you made with Gloria is a separate matter. I set the phone down and picked up my own phone again, this time opening Frank's screenshot. I turned it toward him. This is your Instagram story from today. 12:23 in the afternoon. That's your hand. That's your gray quarter zip. The same one you're wearing right now. He looked at the screen. Something moved across his face, not guilt, not exactly, but the specific discomfort of a man who has been caught doing something he knew was wrong and is now calculating the fastest route to acceptable. I stopped for coffee. It was a 10-minute stop. Dad, I was heading back. Frank Calloway called me for the first time at 12:41, I said. Your mother had been outside alone for nearly 2 hours by then. The room went very quiet. I picked up the folded paper and held it out across the desk. He took it slowly, the way you take something when you already suspect what it is. He unfolded it. He read it. I watched his eyes move across the line he had written in his own left-leaning cursive 8 months ago, I will never leave Mom alone without supervision, and then move down to his own signature at the bottom. You wrote that, I said. I didn't ask you to write it in any particular way. You chose those words yourself. Derek set the paper down on the desk. He pressed 2 fingers against his mouth and stared at the surface of the desk for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were red at the edges, and I could not tell whether what I was seeing was genuine remorse or the performance of it. After everything I had seen today, I was not sure it mattered. He said quietly. I know I made a mistake today. I know that. I'm sorry. But you have to understand, Amber and I have been trying to balance a lot of things. Gloria has been struggling and Amber has been stressed, and I was trying to keep the peace on both sides, and I made a bad call. That's all this was. A bad call. A bad call, I repeated. Yes, I looked at my son, at the red edges of his eyes and the gray quarter zip and the paper bag of Thai food he had brought as a peace offering, purchased from a restaurant 12 minutes from where my wife had been sitting alone on porch steps 2 hours earlier. Shartani, I said, a bad call is missing a turn on the highway. A bad call is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. I picked up the folded paper and held it for a moment, before setting it back in the center of the desk. You made a promise to your father in a hospital room this morning. You signed that paper 8 months ago with your own hand. Your mother has Parkinson's disease. She cannot unlock her phone when her hands are shaking. She cannot get up the porch steps without holding on to something. These are not new facts, Derek. You have known them for 3 years. Derek looked at the paper. He did not pick it up again. Go home, I said. Take the food with you. Come back when you're ready to have a different kind of conversation. He stood slowly. He picked up the paper bag. He walked to the doorway of the office and stopped his back to me, one hand on the doorframe. Are you going to tell Mom about all of this? He asked. Your mother, I said, spent 2 hours protecting you today when she had every reason not to. I think you should think very carefully about what that means before you ask me what I'm going to do. He left without another word. I heard the front door close behind him. I heard his car start in the driveway. I sat down in my chair and listened until the sound of his engine faded down Claremont Drive, and the night went quiet around me. Then I picked up my phone and typed 2 words into the search bar. Thomas Breyer. Before I reveal what my son said in the driveway while he thought I was fast asleep. Comment the word truth below to show me you're still listening. Please note the remaining part of this story contains fictionalized dramatic elements. If you prefer strictly factual content, you are welcome to turn off the video right now. I did not go to bed that night. I tried around 10 o'clock because the discharge instructions from Dr. Owens had been very specific about rest. And I was aware in the distant way you are aware of things when your mind is occupied somewhere else entirely, that my body had been through a significant amount that day. I lay down on my side of the bed. Peggy was already asleep, her breathing slow, and even beside me, her left hand resting on the pillow between us, with its familiar, trembling rhythm. I watched the ceiling for 20 minutes. Then I got up and went back to my office. But before all of that, before the ceiling and the 20 minutes and the return to my desk, something had happened. When Derek left, I had walked down the hallway, intending to check on Peggy, and found her already asleep on the sofa, the television off. Now the room quiet and dark, except for the small nightlight we kept plugged in near the bookshelf for when she needed to get up in the night. I had stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I had turned and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. The kitchen window faces the driveway. I had not thought about that when I turned on the tap. Derek's car was still there. He was sitting in the driver's seat with the interior light on, and even from the kitchen window I could see that he was on the phone. The window on his side was cracked open 2 inches. He did it out of habit, that old habit of his, of needing a little air when he talked on the phone, a thing I had noticed when he was a teenager, and he would sit in his car in the driveway after coming home late, finishing conversations before he came inside. The September night had gone cold enough that I could see the faint shape of his breath in the air each time he exhaled. I turned off the kitchen tap. I stood very still beside the sink. His voice came through the cracked window in fragments at first, the low, even rhythm of someone reporting, rather than arguing, the kind of tone you use when you are explaining a situation to someone who already knows the context. Then I heard Amber's voice through the car speakers. She was on speakerphone. Her voice was clear enough that the words came through without distortion. "Derek, we need to think about this more carefully," she said. "Your dad isn't going to let this go. He was angrier than you expected." "He'll calm down," Derek said. "He always does. He's not a man who stays angry." That's not what I'm worried about." A pause on her end. A calculating pause, the kind that means someone is deciding how directly to say what they are already thinking. "Your mom is a liability now, Derek. The caregiving is only going to get more intensive. We can't build our future around her needs." I set my glass of water down on the counter without drinking from it. "I know," Derek said. His voice was quiet, certain. The voice of a man confirming something he had already privately concluded. "I know that. So what do we do?" "We need to be patient," Derek said. "We just need to be patient. My parents have assets, Amber. Real assets. The retirement accounts are untouched. And the house—" "How patient?" Amber's voice sharpened. "How patient are we supposed to be? The house alone is worth over $600,000. That money is just sitting there while we're still paying down the mortgage on our place." Derek said nothing for a moment. Outside the window, a car passed slowly down Claremont Drive, its headlights sweeping briefly across the driveway. "Dad won't be able to manage everything much longer," Derek said. "His health is going to become a factor now too after today. And Mom is only going to need more support as time goes on. Neither of them is going to be able to stay on top of everything the way they have been. So we need to be positioned," Amber said, "when the time comes." "Yes," Derek said. "When the time comes." I stood at the kitchen window with both hands flat on the counter and listened to my son and his wife discuss the timeline of my decline. I had built that house with 30 years of civil engineering work and 40 years of careful saving. Peggy and I had refinanced it once in 2009 when the market went sideways, and we needed the equity to keep things steady. We had paid it off in full by 2019. It was not an investment to us. It was the place where we had raised our family, where Peggy had hung yellow curtains in every kitchen we had ever owned, where I still kept a spiral notebook in the glove compartment of my car, because some habits become part of who you are. It was home. Derek started his engine. I stepped back from the window before his headlights came on. I stood in the dark kitchen and listened to his car back out of the driveway and move down the street until the sound was gone. Then I stood there a moment longer. There is a specific kind of pain that does not announce itself loudly. It does not come with a sharp intake of breath or a sudden physical sensation. It settles in slowly, the way cold settles into a house when the furnace goes out in the night. You do not notice it all at once, but at some point you realize that every room is colder than it should be and has been for a while. I washed my glass. I dried it. I put it back in the cabinet. I went to Peggy's chair in the living room and sat in it for a few minutes. Not in my own chair, hers the one closer to the lamp with the softer cushion that she had picked out herself at a furniture store on Polaris Parkway 6 years ago. I sat in her chair and I put my hands on the armrests where her hands rested every evening. Then I got up, walked back to my office, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. Thomas Breyer's law office had a website. It was straightforward and plain in the way that established attorneys' websites tend to be: no flashy graphics, just an address on North High Street, a phone number, and office hours that began at 8:30 in the morning. Monday was 2 days away. I wrote the phone number down in the spiral notebook I kept on my desk. I wrote it twice on 2 separate lines, pressing the pen firmly into the paper. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the desk lamp, and walked down the dark hallway to check on my wife. I was up before 5:30 the next morning. The sky outside the bedroom window was still fully dark, with that particular quality of darkness that comes in the last hour before dawn. Not the deep, settled black of midnight, but something thinner and more provisional, as though the night is already aware that its time is running short. I dressed quietly, moving around the room the way I had learned to move over the past 3 years, slowly and deliberately, making no sound that might wake Peggy before she was ready to wake on her own. In the kitchen, I made coffee. I stood at the counter while it brewed and looked out the window at the driveway. Empty. The spot where Derek's car had been was just concrete now, faintly damp from the overnight dew. I took my coffee to my office and sat down at my desk. I had been thinking in the hours between when I finally lay down and when I gave up on sleep entirely about a text message. It had arrived on my phone 4 months ago in late May, and at the time I had dismissed it as a misdirect. Derek had sent it to me instead of Amber, a mistake he had caught within 2 minutes, following it up immediately with a second message that said, "Sorry, wrong thread." I had thought nothing of it. People sent messages to the wrong contact all the time. I had not read it carefully. I had not saved it. But I had not deleted it either. I opened my messages and scrolled back. 4 months of texts with Derek, birthday acknowledgments, occasional check-ins, the practical logistics of a son who lived 20 minutes away and visited less often than that implied. I scrolled past all of it back through May and found the message. It had been sent at 11:14 on a Wednesday morning. It read, "We need to move fast before they change anything. The house alone is over $600K and the retirement accounts are untouched. Babe, if we wait too long, we lose the window." I read it 3 times. Then I took a screenshot of it and saved it to the folder on my phone that I had created the previous evening, the one I had labeled with no particular creativity documents. The folder already contained the banking transaction screenshot, Frank's photo of the Instagram story, and a scan of the paper with Derek's signature that I had made using the scanner app on my phone before I went to bed. I added the text message screenshot to the folder. Then I locked my phone and set it face down on the desk and drank my coffee. The doorbell rang at 9:17. I checked the doorbell camera on my phone before getting up. Derek was standing on the front porch holding a white bakery box from Panera, the kind that holds a dozen pastries. He was wearing a different jacket than yesterday, a navy fleece collar up against the morning chill. He was not looking at the door. He was looking at his phone, holding it up at chest height, the camera facing outward toward the house front. I watched on my phone screen as he took 2 steps back to get a better angle. He held the phone steady for a moment. Then he lowered it, looked at the screen, appeared to make some adjustment, and raised it again. He took a second photo. Then he tucked his phone into his jacket pocket, straightened his collar, picked up the bakery box, and pressed the doorbell a second time. I set my phone down on the desk. I walked down the hallway to the front door and opened it. Dad. Derek's face arranged itself into an expression of warm concern. I brought breakfast. How are you feeling? You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't sleep much, I said. Come in. He followed me to the kitchen. I poured him a cup of coffee without asking because I had been pouring Derek coffee since he was 16 years old and had decided he was old enough for it, which he had not been, but I had poured it anyway. He set the bakery box on the table and opened it. Cinnamon rolls, almond croissants, one of the lemon pound cake slices that Peggy had always liked. Is Mom up? He asked. Not yet. She had a hard day yesterday. She needs the sleep. He nodded, wrapping both hands around his mug. He looked at the table. He looked at the window. He looked at the bakery box. He was working towards something and taking his time getting there, which told me he had rehearsed it. Dad, he said finally. I've been thinking a lot since last night, about you and Mom, about what you're both going to need going forward. He lifted his eyes to mine. I think we need to have a real conversation about the future, about what makes sense for everyone. Tell me what you have in mind, I said. He wrapped his hands more tightly around the mug. You've been carrying a lot. The appointments, the medications, the house. It's a big property for 2 people, and with Mom's condition getting more demanding and now your surgery. He paused, choosing his next words with care. There are some really good continuing care communities around Columbus now. Places where you'd both have support around the clock, professional staff activities, everything managed for you. You could sell the house, use the equity live somewhere designed for this stage of life. And the retirement accounts? I asked. He blinked. What about them? If we sold the house and moved into a care facility, what would happen to the retirement accounts? Well, he shifted in his chair. Amber and I could help manage that. Keep an eye on things. Make sure it's all handled properly so you don't have to worry about it. I looked at my son across the kitchen table, at the navy fleece with the collar turned up, at the bakery box he had brought with its lemon pound cake slice for his mother, purchased from a place 12 minutes from our house on a Saturday morning, when he had presumably already known exactly what he intended to say when he got here. That's very thoughtful, I said. Let me think about it. His shoulders dropped a fraction. The small, involuntary release of a man who believes the conversation has gone the way he needed it to go. He reached for a cinnamon roll. He bit into it. Derek, I said, sit right there. There's something I want to show you before you go. I went to my office and came back with my phone. I sat down across from Derek at the kitchen table and set the phone between us, screen up, the way you set something down when you want another person to be able to read it without having to hand it to them. The message was already open. I had pulled it up while I was walking down the hallway. Derek looked at the screen. I watched his face. There is a particular expression that crosses a person's face when they read something they wrote themselves and had believed was private. A very specific kind of recognition, the kind that arrives before the mind has time to construct a defense around it. It lasts only a second or two. but it is unmistakable. I saw it. That came to me in late May, I said. Wednesday morning, 11:14. You sent it to my thread instead of Amber's. You followed it up 2 minutes later with a message that said, "Sorry, wrong thread." I picked the phone up and set it face down. I didn't delete it. Derek pushed back from the table slightly. Not standing up, just creating distance, the physical reflex of a man who needs more space between himself and what is in front of him. He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug and stared at the center of the table. "Eric," I said, "I want you to understand something. I am not angry in the way that you think I am. I passed through that kind of angry sometime last night, standing at the kitchen window, listening to you and Amber in the car. What I am now is something different." He looked up. "Dad, let me finish." I kept my voice even. "You are my son. You have been my son for 38 years, and nothing that has happened in the past 24 hours changes that. But I need you to hear me clearly right now. And I need you to hear me only once, because I am not going to repeat it." I folded my hands on the table. "I know about the plan. I know what you and Amber have been discussing. I know when you started discussing it. And I want you to understand that your mother and I are not going to be managed." Derek's jaw tightened. "Dad, that message was taken out of context. Amber and I were talking about being financially prepared, not about—" "You wrote the words 'move fast,'" I said. "You wrote them before they change anything. That is not a conversation about financial preparation, Derek. That is a conversation about timing, about waiting for the right moment." I paused. "What moment were you waiting for?" He did not answer. "I have one more question," I said. "When you came here this morning with the pastries and the conversation about care facilities and retirement accounts, was any part of that about your mother and me, or was it entirely about the house?" The kitchen was quiet. Outside the window, a cardinal landed on the feeder I had installed on the back fence 3 summers ago for Peggy, who had always loved cardinals. It sat there for a moment, very red against the gray September morning, and then it was gone. Derek set his mug down on the table. "I do care about you and Mom," he said. His voice had gone low and strained. "That is not something you get to take away from me just because of one conversation." "I'm not taking anything away from you," I said. "I'm asking you a direct question and giving you the opportunity to answer it honestly. That is more than you gave me yesterday morning when you promised to stay with your mother and left before 11 o'clock. He looked away, out the same window, at the empty feeder post where the cardinal had been. "I made mistakes," he said finally. "I know I made mistakes, but you're turning this into something bigger than it is. You're taking a few bad days and building a case out of them like I'm some kind of—" He stopped, pressed his lips together. "Like you're some kind of what?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. He picked up his mug again, looked into it, set it down without drinking. "Derek," I said, "I want you to go home now. I want you to think very carefully about the conversation you had in that car last night. And I want you to think about what kind of son you want to be going forward. Not to me. To your mother." I stood up from the table. "That is the only thing I am asking you to think about right now. Not the house, not the accounts. Your mother. The woman who spent 2 hours on a porch yesterday protecting you." He stood up slowly. He closed the bakery box, whether out of habit or because he needed something to do with his hands, I could not say. He carried it to the counter and left it there and walked toward the front door. In the hallway, he stopped. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked. His voice was different now, quieter. The performance had gone out of it. "Mom, is she doing okay?" I looked at my son standing in my hallway with his navy fleece and his hands at his sides, and the question in his voice that sounded for the first time since he had walked through the door that morning like something real. "She had a hard night," I said. "She is resting." He nodded once. He opened the front door and walked out. I stood in the hallway and listened to his car back out of the driveway for the second time in less than 12 hours. Then I walked back to the kitchen. I poured myself a second cup of coffee. I opened the bakery box and took out the lemon pound cake slice and set it on a small plate that I covered with plastic wrap and put in the refrigerator for when Peggy woke up. Then I picked up my phone, went to my office, and called Thomas Breyer's office. It was a Saturday, so I'd reached his voicemail. I left a message in the same careful, measured way that I had spoken to Derek, stating my name, my number, and 3 words. "It is time." Thomas Breyer called me back at 7:58 on Sunday morning. I was already at my desk with coffee when the phone rang. Thomas was not a man who waited until Monday to return a call that had been left on a Saturday with the words, "It is time." We had known each other for 11 years, long enough that certain things did not need explaining. "Walter," he said, "when do you want to come in?" "Tomorrow morning," I said. "First thing." 8:30, he said. "I'll have the coffee on." His office was on North High Street, on the 4th floor of a building that had been there since the 1960s and showed its solid brick exterior slow elevator. The particular smell of a place where serious work had been done for a very long time. I had always liked it. It reminded me of the kind of permanence that gets built one careful decision at a time. Thomas met me at the door himself. He was 61 years old, trim and deliberate in the way of a man who had spent 4 decades choosing his words carefully and had learned that the same discipline applied to everything else. He shook my hand, looked at my face, and said nothing about how I appeared, which told me I appeared exactly as bad as I suspected. He poured the coffee. We sat down on opposite sides of his desk. "Tell me everything," he said. I told him everything. I started with Friday morning, the surgery, Derek's promise in the hospital room, the 20 missed calls, Peggy on the porch steps. I told him about the phone call with Derek in the recovery room, about signing the AMA paperwork, about crouching in front of Peggy's chair in Frank Calloway's kitchen and seeing the white gauze bandage on her knee. I told him about the Instagram story and the $480 spa charge and the paper with Derek's signature that I had kept in my desk drawer for 6 months. I told him about standing at the kitchen window in the dark and listening to Derek and Amber discuss the timeline of our decline through a cracked car window. I told him about the text message from May. Thomas listened to all of it without interrupting. He made 3 small notes on the legal pad in front of him. When I finished, he set his pen down and was quiet for a moment. 2 years ago, he said, I suggested you review the authority documents, the power of attorney, the medical directives. I remember, I said. You told me Peggy was doing well and Derek was around when he was needed. I know what I told you. He looked at me steadily. I'm not saying that to make you feel worse than you already do. I'm saying it because it means we have some catching up to do, and I want you to understand the scope of what we're looking at. He picked up his pen again. Derek currently holds medical power of attorney for both you and Peggy. That means if either of you is incapacitated, he has the legal authority to make healthcare decisions on your behalf. I want that changed, I said. I assumed you did. Who do you want instead? I had thought about this for 2 days. I had thought about it while I sat in Peggy's chair Friday night, and while I lay awake in the dark Saturday morning, and while I moved quietly around the house Sunday, trying not to disturb Peggy's rest. There was only one answer that felt entirely certain. "Donna," I said. "Derek's sister, our niece." Thomas wrote the name down. "Tell me about her." "She's 40 years old. She lives in Westerville. She works as a school administrator. She is organized. She is calm under pressure, and she does not make decisions based on what is convenient for her." I paused. "She is the only person in our extended family who has ever called to ask how Peggy was actually doing, not how we were managing, not whether we needed anything in a general way. She called to ask about Peggy specifically, about the tremor, about the medication schedule, about whether Peggy was sleeping. She did that on her own. Nobody asked her to." Thomas looked up from his pad. Something in his expression shifted. Not surprise exactly, but the particular recognition of a man who has spent decades sorting the genuine from the performed and knows which one he is looking at. "All right," he said. "Here is what I can do. I can draft a revocation of Derek's medical power of attorney for both you and Peggy effective immediately upon signing. I can prepare a new durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy naming Donna. I can establish a revocable living trust with Peggy as primary beneficiary, which will protect the house and the retirement accounts from any outside claim and ensure they pass directly without going through probate. And I can prepare amended beneficiary designations for your financial accounts." He set his pen flat on the pad. "The trust takes a little longer to fund properly, but the POA documents and the healthcare directives I can have ready by tomorrow morning." "How do I close the joint account?" I asked. "Derek has access to a savings account we set up years ago." "You go to the bank in person and remove his name," Thomas said. "You can do that today. You do not need his consent or his presence to remove an authorized user from an account you hold as primary." He paused. "Walter, I want to ask you one thing before we proceed. Are you certain about this? Once Derek discovers the changes, and he will discover them, there is no quiet way back." I looked at the framed law degree on the wall behind Thomas's head. The window beside it looked out over North High Street, where Columbus was going about its Monday morning in the ordinary way that cities do traffic. Moving people walking the world, continuing without reference to any particular family's private reckoning. "Thomas," I said, "my wife fell trying to get inside her own house because our son left her alone to take his mother-in-law shopping. She has Parkinson's disease. She cannot unlock her phone when her hands are shaking." I picked up my coffee cup. "There is no version of this where I am not certain." Thomas nodded once. He picked up his pen. "I'll have the documents ready by 8:30 tomorrow morning," he said. "Bring Donna if she's available. She'll need to sign the acceptance of her role." I set my cup down. "I'll call her tonight." "One more thing," Thomas said. He looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. "How are you feeling physically? You had surgery 4 days ago." "I feel fine," I said. He looked at me the way Dr. Owens had looked at me in the recovery room, the careful analytical assessment of someone who knows the difference between fine and functional. "Go home and rest this afternoon," he said. "You're not going to be any good to Peggy if you put yourself back in the hospital." I told him I would. I meant it this time. I did what Thomas told me to do. I went home and I rested. I slept for 3 hours on the sofa in my office, which is not the same as sleeping in a bed, but is considerably better than not sleeping at all. And when I woke up, it was mid-afternoon, and the house smelled like the chicken soup Peggy made every fall when the weather turned the kind she had been making since before we were married, with egg noodles and a bay leaf and the particular ratio of celery to carrot that she had never written down because she said she did not need to. I went to the kitchen doorway and stood there. Peggy was at the stove. She had one hand on the counter for balance and a wooden spoon in the other, and she was stirring the pot with the slow, deliberate patience of a woman who had learned to work around what her body would and would not do. She had not heard me come in. I watched her for a moment. Before I said anything, the careful stance, the way she shifted her weight slightly every few seconds to keep her balance. The steadiness she maintained through sheer concentration and 40 years of knowing her own kitchen. She was the most capable person I had ever known. "You made soup," I said. She turned and looked at me over her shoulder. "You slept," she said. "Good." I set the table while she finished. We sat down together the way we had sat down together for 40 years. The same chairs, the same side of the table each, the small habits of a shared life that accumulate so quietly you do not notice them until you try to imagine the table without the other person on the other side. We ate without talking for a while. The soup was exactly right the way it always was. "Tell me what happened at the lawyer's office," Peggy said. I looked up. She was watching me with those steady brown eyes, both hands wrapped around her bowl for warmth, and I understood that she had known where I had gone this morning and had been waiting all afternoon for me to be ready to talk about it. So I told her all of it. The same way I had told Thomas, but without the legal framework, just the facts laid out plainly, the way Peggy had always preferred. She did not interrupt. She asked 2 questions, one about Donna, and one about whether the changes would hold up if Derek challenged them. I answered both as honestly as I could. When I finished, the soup had gone slightly cool in our bowls, and the kitchen had gotten darker around us as the evening came on. "Walter," Peggy said, "he's still our son." "I know that," I said. "Nothing I'm doing changes that." "I mean—" She stopped, set her spoon down. Her left hand trembled against the side of the bowl. "I mean that I don't want this to be the end of something. I don't want to look back on this when we're older and think that we closed a door that didn't need to be closed." "I'm not closing a door," I said. "I'm changing the locks on a door that was already being used by someone who didn't respect what was behind it." I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "There's a difference." She looked at our hands, hers trembling beneath mine, mine still against hers. "I've been thinking about something all day," she said quietly. "About Friday. About sitting on that porch." She lifted her eyes to mine. "I wasn't frightened when Derek left, Walter. Not at first. I thought he'd be back in 20 minutes. A pause. "I started to be frightened when I tried to get up and my legs wouldn't cooperate the way I needed them to, and I realized I was going to have to get myself inside on my own, and I couldn't." Her voice stayed level. "That is the most frightening thing. Not being abandoned, being unable." I held her hand, and I did not say anything for a moment, because there was nothing to say that would be adequate, and she did not need adequacy right now. She needed to be heard. "I hear you," I said. She nodded. "Do what you need to do," she said. "I trust you." "Peggy." I tightened my hand around hers. "Is there anything you want? Anything specific from all of this that matters most to you?" She thought about it for a moment. Outside the kitchen window, the backyard was going dark, the shape of the old oak tree at the far end of the yard becoming a silhouette against the last of the evening light. "I just want to stay in this house," she said. "That's all I've ever wanted. This house with you. Everything else we can figure out." I looked at my wife across the kitchen table, at the soup she had made while I slept, at the wooden spoon resting on the counter behind her, at the yellow curtains she had chosen for this kitchen the same way she had chosen yellow curtains for every kitchen we had ever had together, because she said you ought to wake up every morning looking at something that made the day feel worth starting. "Then that's exactly what's going to happen," I said. After dinner, I washed the bowls while Peggy sat at the table and we talked about other things, a novel she was reading, whether the oak tree needed trimming before winter, a letter from our insurance company that needed a response. The ordinary texture of a life. At 8:15, I went to my office and called Donna. She picked up on the second ring. "Uncle Walter, I was hoping you'd call." "How much do you know?" I asked. "Frank called me Saturday," she said. "He thought I should know what happened on Friday." A beat. "Uncle Walter, I'm so sorry. How is Aunt Peggy?" "She made soup today," I said. "She's doing better." "Good." Her voice was warm and certain in equal measure. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to come to Thomas Breyer's office tomorrow morning at 8:30, I said. "There are some documents that require your signature. It involves taking on a formal role in your aunt's care. I want to make sure you understand fully what I'm asking before you agree." "Uncle Walter," Donna said, and her voice shifted into something quieter, more direct. "I've been worried about Aunt Peggy for a long time. Whatever you need, I'll be there at 8:30. I thanked her. I set the phone down on my desk. Through the wall, I could hear the faint sound of Peggy's television, the evening news turned low. The ordinary sound of our ordinary house on an ordinary Monday night. Tomorrow morning, everything was going to change. Donna was already waiting outside Thomas's office when I stepped off the elevator at 8:28. She was standing in the hallway with a paper coffee cup in each hand and a canvas tote bag over one shoulder, wearing the kind of practical, unhurried expression that told me she had been there for at least 10 minutes and had used the time to compose herself rather than worry. She was 40 years old and had her mother's dark eyes and her father's square jaw and absolutely nothing of Derek about her except the last name. She held out one of the coffee cups. "I didn't know how you took it," she said, "so I got it black and brought sugar packets in my bag." "Black is fine," I said. She looked at me the way people look at someone they are genuinely concerned about but have decided not to make a fuss over. "How are you feeling your incisions?" "Sore," I said. "Manageable." She nodded. That was the end of that. Thomas opened his office door at exactly 8:30. He shook Donna's hand and looked at her the same way he had looked at me the day before, the careful, calibrated assessment of a man who has spent 4 decades reading people across a desk. Whatever he saw appeared to satisfy him. He gestured us both inside. The documents were laid out on the conference table in 3 organized stacks each with a colored tab marking the signature lines. Thomas walked us through each one with the methodical precision of a man who understood that clarity now prevented confusion later. The first stack was the revocation. "This formally withdraws Derek's medical power of attorney for both you and Peggy." Thomas said, "Effective the moment you both sign. From that point forward, he has no legal authority to make healthcare decisions on either of your behalves, regardless of circumstances." I signed. Then I thought of Peggy at home, her hands too unsteady for a pen this early in the morning, and I remembered that Thomas had prepared a separate signature appointment for her at the house that afternoon. A notary was coming at 2 o'clock. The second stack was Donna's documents. Thomas explained each one in plain language. The durable power of attorney gives Donna authority to manage financial and legal matters on your behalf if you become unable to do so. The healthcare proxy specifically covers medical decisions who speaks for you, what treatments you consent to, what your wishes are if you cannot express them yourself. He looked at Donna. "This is not a small responsibility. Do you understand the scope of what you're accepting?" Donna set her coffee cup down on the edge of the table. "I understand," she said. I've been reading about Parkinson's care management for 2 years. I know Aunt Peggy's medication schedule, her neurologist's name, and which hospital she prefers. I also know she doesn't like being talked about in the third person when she's in the room, which I intend to remember. She picked up the pen. Where do I sign? Thomas looked at her for a moment. Then he smiled, a small, brief thing, the smile of a man who does not deploy them often. Right there, he said. The third stack was the trust documents and the amended beneficiary designations. Thomas explained that the revocable living trust would hold the house and the retirement accounts, with Peggy as primary beneficiary and Donna as successor trustee. The practical effect, he said, is that Derek has no claim on these assets now or in the future unless you choose to include him. The house stays yours. The accounts stay yours. If something happens to either of you, nothing goes through probate. It transfers directly according to the trust terms. I signed everything Thomas put in front of me. After the meeting, Donna drove me to the bank on Broad Street, while Thomas's paralegal filed the revocation paperwork. The account manager at the bank was a courteous young woman named Ms. Patricia Webb, who asked for my identification, confirmed my status as primary account holder, and removed Derek's authorized access in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. She did not ask why. She processed it the way banks process the ordinary business of people's lives, efficiently and without comment. We drove back to Claremont Drive at 11:45. I heard them before I opened the front door. Peggy's voice and Donna's voice coming from the living room, not the careful, managed conversation of two people being polite to each other, but the loose and comfortable rhythm of people who were glad to be in the same room. I stood in the entryway for a moment and listened. Peggy was laughing, not the small, polite laugh she used in social situations. The real one, the one that started in her chest and came out a little surprised at itself, the one I had not heard enough of in the past 3 years. Donna had apparently said something about the oak tree in the backyard, something about whether it was haunted, and Peggy found this genuinely funny in the way she found things genuinely funny when she was relaxed and unguarded and entirely herself. I hung my coat by the door and walked into the living room. Donna was sitting on the ottoman across from Peggy's chair, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees, and Peggy was sitting with the blanket across her lap, and both hands wrapped around a fresh cup of tea, and the two of them looked up when I came in with expressions that told me the conversation had been going on for a while, and would continue long after I sat down. "The notary comes at 2, I said. "I know," Peggy said. "Donna told me." She looked at Donna with an expression I had not seen on her face in longer than I could precisely name something open and relieved, like a window that had been painted shut for years and had finally been worked loose. She explained everything very clearly. "She tends to do that," I said. Donna grinned. "I brought cookies," she said, pointing to a bakery box on the coffee table. "The good ones from the place on Dublin Granville Road." I sat down in my chair. The afternoon was quiet and warm and ordinary, in the best possible way, the kind of afternoon that does not announce itself, but that you recognize later as one of the ones that mattered. My phone buzzed on the side table. A text from Derek. "Dad, I tried to check on something and my access isn't working. I also tried the medical stuff online and it's showing an error. Can we talk?" I set the phone face down on the side table. "Everything all right?" Donna asked. "Yes," I said. "Everything is exactly right." He did not call first. At 6:43 that evening, the doorbell camera on my phone lit up with a notification, and when I checked the screen, I saw Derek standing on the front porch in his work clothes, the dark slacks and button-down he wore to the insurance office, which told me he had driven here directly from work without going home first. He was not holding flowers or a bakery box. He was holding his phone in both hands, looking down at it, his jaw set in the particular way it's set when he was trying to keep something contained. I went to the front door and opened it. "Derek," I said. He looked up from his phone. His eyes moved past me into the hallway, then into the living room beyond where the lamp was on and the television was running low. "Can I come in?" "Of course," I said. I stepped back. He walked in. He stopped 2 steps into the living room. Donna was sitting in the armchair across from Peggy's sofa, her canvas tote on the floor beside her, a cup of tea in her hand. She looked up when Derek came in. The expression on her face was steady and unsurprised, the expression of someone who had been expecting this and had decided in advance how she was going to handle it. Derek's face went very still. "What is she doing here?" he asked. He was looking at Donna but directing the question at me. "Donna has been here since this morning," I said. "She's staying for dinner." Derek's eyes moved to Peggy. Peggy was sitting with her blanket and her tea and the careful composure she maintained in difficult moments, and she looked back at her son with an expression that was neither cold nor warm, but simply honest. The expression of a woman who had decided to let things unfold without trying to manage them. "Mom," Derek said. His voice had shifted softer, more uncertain. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Derek," she said. "Sit down." He did not sit down. He turned to me. "Dad, I've been trying to access the savings account all afternoon. My login isn't working, and I went online to check the medical authorization forms for the family portal, and my name isn't showing up anymore." His voice was controlled, but the control was costing him something. "What is going on?" "The savings account has been restructured," I said. "Your access has been removed. You are no longer an authorized user." Derek stared at me. "When did that happen?" "This morning." "And the medical authorization?" "Also this morning. Your medical power of attorney for both your mother and me has been revoked. Donna has been named as healthcare proxy and durable power of attorney going forward." The room was quiet for a moment. Derek looked at Donna. Donna set her tea down on the side table and looked back at him without flinching. "Did you put him up to this?" Derek asked her. His voice had an edge, now thin and tight. Donna stood up from the armchair. She was not a tall woman, but she had a way of occupying a room that had nothing to do with height. "Nobody put him up to anything," she said. "He's your father. He made decisions about his own life and your mother's life, which is something he is entirely entitled to do." She paused. "And I said yes when he asked me because somebody in this family needed to." Derek turned back to me. The control in his voice was fraying at the edges now, the careful management giving way to something rawer underneath. "Dad, what is this? You changed everything, the accounts, the medical stuff, all of it, without talking to me, without telling me." "I didn't need your permission," I said. "These are our accounts, our medical directives, your mother's and mine. I know that, but..." He pressed one hand flat against the side of his face, a gesture I recognized from when he was a boy, and was trying to slow his own thinking down. "Dad, this feels like a punishment. Like you're taking everything away because of what happened Friday." "I am not taking anything away from you," I said. "You never had authority over your mother's health care. You were given it years ago because I trusted you with it. That trust has changed." Derek's hand dropped from his face. "Because of one day." "No," I said. "Not because of one day." He looked at me for a long moment. I held his gaze without difficulty. There was a time not so long ago when these moments of direct confrontation with my son had made me want to find a middle ground, to soften the edge, to find some version of the truth that would let us both walk away feeling reasonably all right. I did not feel that way now. I felt entirely clear. "You went through my messages," he said suddenly. His voice tightened. "The text I sent you by mistake in May, you went back and found it." "I never deleted it," I said. "I did not go looking for it. It was there. And you're using it against me. I'm using it to understand what has been happening in my own home." I kept my voice level. "Derek, I stood at the kitchen window Friday night and listened to you and Amber talk about the timeline of our decline. I heard Amber say your mother is a liability. I heard you agree with her. I heard you discuss the value of this house and the retirement accounts. I let that sit between us for a moment. That was not a misunderstanding. That was not one bad day." Derek's jaw worked. He looked at the floor. He looked at Donna. He looked at Peggy, who was watching him with those steady brown eyes that had watched him his entire life. "Babe." His voice cracked slightly on the word, the old word, the word he had used for her since he was small. "Mom, I didn't mean it wasn't like that." Peggy looked at her son for a long moment. "I know you love me, Derek," she said quietly. "I have never doubted that." A pause. "But love isn't only what you feel. It's also what you do." Derek stood in the middle of our living room with his work clothes and his phone and no bakery box and no prepared speech, and for the first time since Friday morning, he looked like a man who did not know what to do next. "Mike, you're punishing me for one mistake," he said. He was looking at me again. His voice had gone quiet, almost a question. I looked at my son, at the boy who had learned to ride a bike on this street and had come home from college breaks to sleep in the room at the end of the hall, and had stood beside my hospital bed 4 days ago and gripped my hand and said, "Don't worry about Mom, I've got her." "She'll go home, Derek," I said, "and tell Amber that whatever she is planning to say to the family, she should think very carefully first." He left without another word. He came back the next morning. I was not surprised. I had known watching him walk out the front door the previous evening that he was not finished, that he had left because he did not know what to say in that moment, not because he had run out of things to say. Derek had never been a man who left things unresolved when he believed there was still an argument to be made. It was a quality I had once admired in him. He rang the doorbell at 7:51. Donna had gone home the night before after dinner. Peggy was still asleep. I was at my desk with coffee when the camera notification came through, and I sat for a moment looking at the image on my phone. My son on the front porch in jeans and a fleece no work clothes. This time hands in his pockets, looking at the door with the expression of a man who has spent the night preparing himself for something. I went to the door and opened it. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Just the two of us." "Come in," I said. I led him to my office, not the kitchen, not the living room, the office where the desk was between us and the documents still sat in their organized stacks, and the folded paper with his signature was exactly where I had left it. He sat in the chair across from the desk. I remained standing for a moment, then sat down too, because what I had to say did not require the advantage of height. It only required the truth. "I've been up all night," Derek said. His eyes were red at the rims. His voice had none of the management of the previous evening, no calculation, no preparation for how it would land. Just the raw, stripped quality of a man who had exhausted his defenses. "I've been trying to figure out how we got here, how things got this bad between us." "I can tell you how," I said. He looked at me. "Okay." I opened the desk drawer and took out the folded paper. I did not unfold it. I set it on the desk between us and kept my hand flat beside it. 5 days ago. I said, you stood in a hospital room and held my hand and told me not to worry about your mother. You said you had her. Those were your exact words. I paused. Before that, 6 months ago, you sat in this chair and wrote that paper and signed your name to it. You chose those words yourself. Nobody suggested them to you. I tapped the paper once with 2 fingers. And before that, for 3 years, your mother has been managing a progressive neurological disease with my help and without yours. Derek's jaw tightened. Dad, I've tried to be there. Derek. My voice was quiet. Final. The voice I used when I meant something to be heard only once. Let me finish. He closed his mouth. Today I am not angry with you in the way that produces shouting, I said. I want you to understand that. What I feel is something colder than that, and something that has been building for longer than last Friday. I folded my hands on the desk. You left your mother alone with Parkinson's disease to take your mother-in-law to a home decor store. Your mother cannot unlock her phone when her hands are shaking. She cannot get up the porch steps without holding on to something. She fell trying to get inside her own house. I looked at my son steadily. Forgetting to buy milk is a mistake, Derek. Leaving your mother alone in that condition to take Gloria Simmons shopping is a choice. Those are 2 different things, and I need you to understand that they are 2 different things. Derek pressed both hands flat against his thighs. The red at the rims of his eyes deepened. I know, he said. His voice had gone very quiet. I know that. Do you? Yes. He swallowed. I've been telling myself all night that it was an emergency, that Gloria was really upset, that Mom seemed fine when I left. But she wasn't fine. She was sitting on the porch floor. He lifted his eyes to mine. I know that, Dad. I know what I did. I looked at my son, at the red eyes and the jeans and the fleece and the hands pressed flat against his thighs, and I thought about the boy who had learned to ride a bike on Claremont Drive, and the teenager who had needed a little air when he talked on the phone, and the man who had gripped my hand in the hospital room and said, I've got her. And I thought about all the distance between who he had been and what he had chosen. There is something else, I said. He waited. The conversation in the car Friday night, I said. The things you and Amber said about this house, about the retirement accounts, about waiting for the right moment. I kept my voice even, measured. The way I had been a civil engineer for 30 years, precise, structural, no wasted material. I need you to understand that I heard all of it, every word. And I need you to understand that what I did this week, the legal changes, the accounts, all of it, was not punishment for Friday. It was a response to a pattern that has been building for a long time. Friday was simply the day I could no longer pretend I did not see it. Derek looked at the folded paper on the desk. He reached out and picked it up. He unfolded it slowly and read it the way a man reads something when he is not looking for information, but for some way to hold what he already knows. He set it back down. He did not refold it. I love Mom, he said. I want you to know that. I do know that, I said. I have never doubted that you love her. Love is not the question. I picked up the paper and folded it along its original crease and placed it back in the drawer. The question is what you are willing to do with that love going forward. Not for me. Not for the house or the accounts or any of that. For her. Derek sat with that for a long moment. Outside the office window, Claremont Drive was going about its Wednesday morning, a dog walker passing a delivery truck making its way slowly down the block. The ordinary motion of a neighborhood. that did not know or care what was being decided in this room. "What do I do now?" he asked. It was the first question he had asked me in this entire conversation that was not a defense or an accusation or a calculation. It was just a question. "Go home," I said. "Talk to Amber. Think about what kind of husband you want to be to her and what kind of son you want to be to your mother, and figure out whether those two things can coexist." I stood up. "And Derek, whatever Amber is planning to tell the family about what has happened this week, I want you to know that I have everything documented, all of it. I would encourage her to be very careful." He stood. He walked to the door of the office. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "Is the door closed?" he asked. "Between us? Is it closed for good?" I looked at my son standing in the doorway of my office on a Wednesday morning in September. "That," I said, "is entirely up to you." 3 days passed quietly. Donna came by on Thursday afternoon and again on Friday morning. She helped Peggy with her physical therapy exercises, the slow, deliberate sequence of movements that Peggy's neurologist had prescribed to maintain motor function, and that I had been walking her through every day for 2 years. Watching Donna guide Peggy through the exercises with the same patient precision I used, counting the repetitions in the same steady voice, I understood that I had made the right call. Not because Donna was performing for anyone, because she was not performing at all. Derek did not come by. He did not call. I had not expected him to, not yet. He was doing what he had always done when something required him to sit with genuine discomfort. He was waiting for it to become manageable before he moved toward it. I did not know whether that would take days or weeks or longer. I had stopped trying to predict it. Saturday morning arrived gray and cool, the kind of October morning that arrives in Columbus like a firm, polite reminder that summer is definitively over. I was at the kitchen table with coffee and the newspaper when my phone began to move. The first message came in at 9:12. It was from my sister-in-law, Carol, Peggy's older sister, who lived in Cincinnati, and called on holidays and sent cards on birthdays, and was the kind of woman who managed family relationships with the careful attention of someone who understood that families required maintenance the way houses did. "Walter," she wrote, "I heard from Amber that you've been going through a hard time since your surgery. She said you've been acting differently and that you made some decisions that have upset Derek very much. I just want to check in. Are you doing okay?" I set my coffee cup down. The second message came at 9:27 from my cousin Robert, who lived in Dayton and whom I saw perhaps twice a year. "Walter, is everything all right? Derek called me last night and said there's been some trouble at home and that you've changed a lot of important things without talking to the family. He sounded really worried about you." The third message came at 9:41 from Peggy's cousin Janet in Toledo. It said simply, "Walter, Amber reached out to me this morning. She said you might not be yourself right now. Is there anything I can do?" I read all 3 messages. Then I put the phone face down on the table and drank the rest of my coffee. Peggy came into the kitchen at 10 o'clock, moving carefully along the counter the way she always did in the morning, when the tremor was at its worst. I poured her a cup of coffee and pulled out her chair, and did not say anything about the messages until she was settled. "Amber has been busy this morning," I said. Peggy wrapped her hands around her cup. She looked at me over the rim. "How bad?" 3 messages so far. Carol, Robert, Janet." I turned my phone over and slid it across the table so she could read them. She read each one carefully, her expression moving through something that was not quite surprise and not quite resignation, but somewhere in the precise middle of both. "She is telling them you're losing your mind," Peggy said. "Not a question. She is suggesting it diplomatically," I said. "Acting differently, not myself. It is more effective than saying it directly, because it cannot be disproven the same way a direct statement can." Peggy set the phone down. "What are you going to do? I am going to let them see for themselves," I said. I went to my office. I opened my laptop. I opened the email application and began composing a message to the family, Carol, Robert, Janet, and the 8 other relatives who were connected enough to the situation that they would either hear from Amber directly or hear secondhand within the week. I kept the message short. I did not explain myself. I did not argue with Amber's characterization of my mental state or my decision-making. I simply wrote, "I want to share some context about recent events in our household. Please read the attached documents at your own pace. I am happy to answer questions afterward." Then I attached 4 files. The first was a screenshot of the banking transaction Serenity Day Spa, $480, 11:47 a.m., the morning of my surgery. The second was Frank's screenshot of Derek's Instagram story. The marble tabletop, the ceramic coffee cup, the caption "Good vibes only," the timestamp 12:23 p.m. The third was a scan of the paper Derek had signed in April. "I will never leave Mom alone without supervision," with his full name and the date clearly visible at the bottom. The fourth was a 37-second audio clip. After Derek left that Friday night, I had remembered that the exterior security camera I installed on the garage 2 years ago after Peggy had a fall, and I wanted to monitor the driveway, had been running all evening. I pulled the footage. Derek's car window had been cracked 2 inches, and the night was quiet. Amber's voice came through with the particular clarity of a phone on speaker mode. "Your mom is a liability now, Derek. We can't build our future around her needs." And Derek's voice, low and certain, "I know. But my parents have assets." "Your mom is a liability now, Derek. We can't build our future around her needs." And Derek's voice, low and certain, "I know. But my parents have assets." I read the email once. I corrected 1 word. Then I pressed send. I went back to the kitchen and sat down with Peggy, and we talked about whether the oak tree needed trimming before the first frost. A conversation we had been meaning to have for 2 weeks and had kept setting aside. Outside the kitchen window, the backyard was going gold and rust, the way Ohio backyards go in October, the leaves coming down in the slow, unhurried way they do when there is no wind to rush them. My phone stayed quiet for 11 minutes. Then it began to ring. Carol called first. She was crying before I finished saying hello. "Walter, I had no idea. I am so sorry. I should have called you directly instead of listening to—" Her voice broke. "How is Peggy? Is she all right?" "She is sitting across the table from me right now," I said. "She would like to talk to you." I handed the phone to Peggy. I watched my wife take it in both trembling hands and press it to her ear, and I watched her face change the way it changes when she is talking to someone she loves and has not talked to in too long. I stood up and went to the window. The messages came in steadily over the next 20 minutes. Robert, Janet, 2 of Peggy's cousins from Akron, my nephew from Pittsburgh, who I had not spoken to in 6 months. Each one a version of the same thing: shock, apology, the particular discomfort of people who realize they had been handed a story and had not thought to ask whose story it was. At 11:43, a text arrived from Derek's number. "Dad, we need to talk." I looked at the message for a long moment. Outside the window, a single cardinal landed on the fence post at the edge of the yard, the same feeder post where the bird had sat during the conversation with Derek in the kitchen 2 weeks ago, there for a moment, and then gone. I set the phone down on the windowsill. I was not ready to respond to Derek yet. But I was beginning to understand what I wanted to say when I was. I did not respond to Derek's message that night. I sat with it for a long time. The phone on the windowsill, the cardinal gone, the October afternoon going quiet around the house. And I thought about what I wanted to say, and whether I was ready to say it. By evening, I had decided I was not. Not because I was still angry. I had moved past anger 3 days ago, somewhere between signing the documents at Thomas's office and watching Peggy laugh in her own living room for the first time in longer than I could name. What I needed was not more time to be angry. What I needed was the right morning. Sunday arrived cold and clear, the kind of October morning that arrives in Ohio with a particular quality of light, low and sharp and honest, the kind of light that does not flatter anything but makes everything look exactly as it is. I was up at 6. I made coffee. I carried my cup out to the front porch and sat down in the wooden chair on the left side of the door, the one I always sat in, and I looked at the chair on the right side. That was the chair Peggy sat in on warm evenings, the one with the slightly softer cushion that she had picked out herself, the one where she had been sitting the morning I went into surgery, right before Derek arrived, drinking her tea and watching the neighborhood come alive for the day. The one that had been empty for 2 hours on a Friday afternoon while I was unconscious on an operating table, and our son was 12 minutes away photographing his coffee. I sat with my cup and looked at her chair and let myself feel the full weight of that for a moment. Not with anger, just with clarity. I heard the car before I saw it. Derek's gray sedan turned onto Claremont Drive at 7:14 and slowed as it approached the house. He pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a moment before the door opened. When he got out, he was not carrying anything. No bakery box, no paper bag, no flowers, no phone visible in his hands. He was wearing the same jeans and fleece from Wednesday morning, and he walked up the front path with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the porch steps. He saw me sitting there before he reached the steps. He stopped. "I wasn't sure you'd be up," he said. "I'm always up at 6, I said. "You know that." He stood at the bottom of the porch steps for a moment. Then he sat down on the top step, his back against the railing post, his long legs stretched out in front of him, and he looked out at the street the way he used to look at it when he was a teenager sitting on these same steps and could not figure out how to start a difficult conversation with me. Some things do not change as much as we think they do. I let the silence sit for a moment, not as a weapon, just as a space. "Gee, I told Amber about the email," he said finally, "about what you sent to the family." He was not looking at me. He was looking at the oak tree at the edge of the yard, its leaves gone mostly gold now, a few of them coming loose in the cold morning air and drifting down without hurry. She was upset. She said you had no right to share private conversations. "The conversations happened outside my house through my open window," I said. "I did not seek them out. I was standing at my own kitchen sink." He nodded slowly. Not agreement exactly, just acknowledgement. "I know." We sat with that. A dog walker passed on the sidewalk a woman I recognized from the end of the block, with her 2 golden retrievers who always walked precisely in step with each other. She raised a hand in greeting. I raised mine back. "I want to ask you something," Derek said. He turned his head and looked at me for the first time since he sat down. His eyes were clearer than they had been Wednesday morning. Tired still, but not raw. The eyes of a man who had come through something and was still in the process of figuring out what it had been. "Did you ever think before all of this that things between us were okay? That I was doing enough?" I thought about it honestly the way the question deserved. "I thought you were doing what you were capable of," I said. I told myself that was the same thing. It isn't. He looked back at the oak tree. A longer pause this time. "I've been thinking about something Donna said to me," he said. "She called me Thursday night. She didn't yell. She just said, Derek, I have never once had to wonder whether Aunt Peggy was safe when Uncle Walter was in the room. He paused. She said she couldn't say the same about me. I did not say anything. He did not need me to. She was right, he said. I set my coffee cup down on the armrest of my chair. I looked at my son sitting on the porch steps of the house where he had grown up in the cold October morning light that did not flatter anything but made everything exactly as it was, and I said what I had been thinking about since the cardinal landed on the fence post the previous afternoon. Derek, I said, you once thought that I needed you to manage things for us, to handle the house, the accounts, the decisions. You thought that was what we needed from you. I kept my voice quiet and level the way the morning was quiet and level. But I have understood something this week that I should have understood a long time ago. The person in this family who has needed the most protection has never been me. It has always been your mother. And the question I am going to spend the rest of my life being certain I can answer is whether she had it. Derek pressed the back of his hand against his mouth. His jaw worked. He looked at the street for a long moment at the oak leaves coming down in the cold, clear air. I want to do better, he said. His voice was rough at the edges. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I want to. Then start there, I said. Figure out what it looks like. And when you have figured it out, not just thought about it, but actually figured it out, come back. I looked at my son. The door is not closed forever, Derek, but it will not open on your schedule anymore. It will open when your mother feels safe. That is the only condition. He nodded. He sat on the step for another moment, then pushed himself to his feet. He stood at the top of the steps and looked at me, and I looked back at him, and there was nothing left to say that had not been said. Tell Mom I asked about her, he said. I will, I said. He walked down the path. He got into his car. He backed out of the driveway slowly and drove down Claremont Drive and turned at the corner and was gone. I sat on the porch for a while longer. The morning was very still. 2 more oak leaves came down from the tree at the back of the yard, spinning slowly in the cold air before they landed. Somewhere down the block, the golden retrievers were barking at something they could hear in the distance. I picked up my coffee cup and stood up from my chair. When I came inside, Donna was already in the kitchen. She had let herself in with the key I had given her Tuesday night, the same way Frank and Ruth had always let themselves into our lives when we needed them without being asked. The kettle was on. The small television on the counter was showing the local news on low. Donna was standing at the counter slicing a loaf of the whole-grain bread that Peggy liked, and Peggy was sitting at the kitchen table in her blue wool sweater. The same one she had been wearing the morning all of this began with both hands wrapped around a fresh cup of tea. She looked up when I came through the kitchen doorway, and she smiled. The real one. The one that started in her chest. The one I had been married to for 40 years and intended to spend the rest of my life making sure I deserved. I hung my coat by the door and sat down across from her. Outside, October was doing what October does in Ohio, steady and unhurried and entirely certain of itself, the world going about the long, necessary work of letting go of what it no longer needed and making room for what came next. Looking back on everything that happened, I keep returning to one simple truth that took me 68 years to fully understand. Protecting the people you love is not a feeling. It is a decision you make every single day in the small moments long before any crisis arrives to test you. I was not a perfect father. I was not a perfect husband. I told myself for too many years that love was enough, that what I felt in my heart would somehow translate into what the people I loved actually needed. It does not work that way. I learned that the hard way standing at a kitchen window in the dark, listening to my own son discuss the timeline of my wife's decline. I believe God puts the right people in your life at the right moment. Frank and Ruth were there. Donna was there. They did not wait to be asked. If this family story has reached you, whether you are a husband, a son, a daughter, a parent, please do not wait for a crisis to show the people you love where they actually stand with you. That is my one honest piece of advice. This Grandpa Stories channel exists because these moments deserve to be heard. If something in this family story moved, you leave a comment below telling me who in your life would do what Donna did. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the right moment. Thank you deeply for staying until the very end of this Grandpa Stories journey with me. The following stories contain fictional elements created purely for educational and storytelling purposes. If this type of content is not for you, we completely respect that. Please feel free to explore other content that better suits you.